is WAAY 31 Law Call.
Good evening and welcome to WAAY 31 Law Call. I'm Robert Lane, sitting in for Sharon Doviat. Tonight we're going to be talking about immigration. So it's a lot more complicated than just Mexican borders. So what about adoption? What if you marry a service guy? What about the workers that you're dealing with? What's the difference between a visa and a green card? And why are some people allowed to work legally in the United States while others aren't? If you have questions about immigration, give us a call at 256-536-0077. With me tonight is Will League of Timberlake and League.
All right, Robert, talking about immigration, it's a special night because we got the Johnny Carson of Law Call here with us tonight. Thank you for coming up.
Just old guys.
That's
old
right.
guys you get on. But you know, before you get to immigration,
right?
Okay, we have a little thing provided by YouTube called "You Make the Law Call." I want you to watch this video and think, what would you do if this was your client? Now keep your eye on the guy in the tree.
Everything looks safe so far. Oh goodness. Ooh.
So how's he going to get his medical bills paid?
A couple things. If it's his house and he's the one up there working, there's no one to fault other than himself. He could make a claim for homeowner's insurance only for medical bills, and usually that's a small limit of $1,000 to $5,000. But if this guy was working for somebody else and that's the training that he got, and he's going to cut a limb right above him, or he was working with a crew and somebody did something improper, there may be a claim to be made to have his medical bills paid, but it looks pretty tough.
Look, if you get hurt, this is the guy that you want, because I know he will sue the guy who built the ladder, if that's what it takes.
Well, you know, you got to have some liability, and a lot of times there's, you know, things happen sometimes, but was he working for somebody who failed to follow these safety precautions? You know, was he not provided any type of safety vest or chain to hold him to the tree? We'll have to look into all that. So surely it wasn't that guy's fault. Maybe
not if he's your client.
If I'm his lawyer, maybe we're going to read.
Okay, we're talking about immigration tonight, and you have very special guests, someone that you've really wanted to get on the show.
So immigration, you know, is not just, hey, people running across the border. I mean, you got Nicaragua, you got Honduras, you've got broken countries, you got Venezuela, Haiti, and you know, people flooding across the border. Mexico is not any longer our most unauthorized immigration violator. It's other countries. But we've got a special guest, and we're talking about when you've got highly skilled employees. Huntsville is a highly technical town. We've got all kinds of engineers from all over the world. And when they hire someone talented from Europe, from Mexico, from South America, what's the process of getting a skilled worker into a job? And it's quite complex. We've got a wonderful guest, Carol Armstrong. She's got offices in Tuscaloosa, in Huntsville. And Carol, first off, thank you for coming up and talking with us tonight on Law Call.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, so so if somebody comes in, let's say they have a master's or a bachelor's or something higher than that. What's the process? Let's say Boeing. They hire somebody from Mexico. There's a couple of degrees, a master's and a bachelor's. What does that Mexican citizen have to look at to come here to work in a skilled profession?
Well, there are a lot of different options for someone if they're coming in to work in a position that requires a bachelor's or a master's degree or higher, of course. And those opportunities can be through, if it's Mexico or Canada, like you mentioned, there's a NAFTA type temporary visa called a TN. There's also temporary visas, the H-1B, which is a specialty occupation, and that's for jobs that require at least a bachelor's degree in a specialized field of study. There are also lots of opportunities for permanent types of status. Most of us commonly associate that as a green card. The green card is a permanent resident card. So there are lots of different options that companies can pursue when they want to bring workers in from outside the United States.
Carol, we were talking earlier about, you know, the difficulty, you know, there was a big surge from 90 to 1997, and it wasn't that bad, and then all of a sudden we've got some issues with other countries. How has it changed? I know in IRA law came out in 1996, put through by Bill Clinton, a Republican Congress, that expanded all the reasons that an illegal immigrant could be deported. And it was the effect of that was actually the opposite effect. They were trying to curb illegal immigration, but it actually made it worse. Tell us a little about how that particular law changed your job in trying to get either a green card, a visa, or someone here, following the law.
That's a good question, Will. One of the biggest impacts from IRA was the unlawful presence bars. Prior to IRA, if someone came in without a visa and they just came in illegally or without inspection, then they could leave and come back, and even multiple times, and there wouldn't be any penalty of doing so. And they could, if they had an opportunity for a job or a family relationship, maybe they married a U.S. citizen, then they would be able to go ahead and do that without respect to the number of times that they entered the United States illegally or the amount of time they'd spent unlawfully present in the United States.
So that puts some teeth in it. So let's say Robert came from where are you from? From France, okay? He comes over. He's here for 6 months and then tries to apply. He has to leave the United States, go back to France for 3 years?
That's correct. If it's 180 days or more, then that person is barred from being able to complete any sort of temporary or permanent processing in the United States for 3 years.
And if you're here for a year longer, then it's 10 years. So it's some pretty significant teeth of that law.
That's correct.
I know, it doesn't seem quite fair, but here, let's get to our phones, okay? Andrea from Albertville is giving us a call. Andrea, what's on your mind tonight?
I would like to know why they don't have to pay taxes, and us people that live in the United States and are citizens, why we pay taxes and they don't.
Good question. Good question. So your question is, why does an illegal immigrant not have to pay taxes and a U.S. citizen does?
Yes.
Okay, I believe they have to pay taxes. Even if they're illegal, they can still file a tax return. Carol, when you have a client that comes in, well, we got some technical difficulties, but as we all know, death and taxes, United States citizen, you got to pay taxes. You can be in trouble if you don't. If you're an illegal immigrant, you can still file taxes. I think Uncle Sam will still take your money, but what's the teeth to enact to make sure that actually happens? So we have ICE. So when you come in, Carol and I were talking before the show, you come into the country, let's say you're seeking asylum, you're seeking protection from a dangerous situation in your home country, and you apply and you receive a temporary status. Well, then ICE will come in, find out where you are, check on your address, and make sure you are where you say you are. Part of that process, if you could be working during that time, and there is a system in place where you do have to pay taxes, and just because you're illegal doesn't mean you can get out of paying taxes. Carol, what are your thoughts on that particular question?
Well, the biggest issue there is the emphasis that's put on the employer. I mean, if the employer is not putting the person on payroll and paying the employment taxes, then of course that's one issue. The other issue is whether or not the person has work authorization. Everybody who earns money in the United States is required to pay income taxes, and it's irregardless of your immigration status or your U.S. citizenship. And so basically what you've got to beware of is that, there are some folks who don't have work authorization, and employers are still, letting them work, but not paying the employment taxes that go along with that, and that is required. But even if someone does not have work authorization and doesn't have a Social Security number, that worker who may be unauthorized is still required to file and pay income taxes, and they can do that with individual taxpayer identification number.
And in your history or your experience, that doesn't trigger ICE to come knocking down their door at this particular juncture, does it?
No. I mean, whether or not someone pays taxes does not influence whether or not ICE is going to come and knock on their door. That doesn't really have anything to do with it.
Okay.
Let's go to Maysville now and find out what Richard wants to ask. Richard, you're on the air.
Yeah, I'd like to know, when they come over the border and they're here in the United States, and you see them walking around, going to restaurants, and they can't even speak English. So that tells you they weren't born over here. But you know what? I want to take some people to school. You get a lot of these immigrants that comes over the border, a lot of them are drug traffickers because what they do, they bring the drugs over the border, which Biden's letting them do it, and they head up to Chicago. Chicago is called a hub where you got distributors all over there. You got these people that tells these young people that come from the border, you come, we put you in apartments, we put you in clothes, cars, and you work for us. And you know what they do? They sell drugs.
Well, let me ask you this, Richard. Let me ask you this.
It's got a bad problem down here with that fentanyl. And I think, man, they need to do something about the border.
Well, I think we can all agree, drug traffickers, sex traffickers, we don't want them. But what about the people who are coming legally? They are seeking asylum. Our laws say if you're at serious threat from your home country, you can seek asylum in the United States. So what are your thoughts about someone legitimately who has an issue, who is scared or is too dangerous to be in their home country? What are your thoughts about their ability or should they be able to seek asylum in this country?
Do it the right way.
And what's the right way?
The right way is to sign up and to get a visa, and then after you get a job and everything, instead of the state supporting you, then you support yourself. You got to be willing to do a job to get a job.
You know, and that makes sense, Richard. I mean, it does make sense. So Carol, when you've got someone coming in, he's saying, look, you got to be able to have a job and be able to add something to this economy, I think is what he's saying. And so if you don't have any skill, if, say, an engineer is applying and you have a manual laborer, what's the likelihood of either one of those coming here on a TN or any type of work visa?
Yeah. Most of your work visas are limited to jobs that require at least a bachelor's degree or higher. There are some limited exceptions to that, but they are very, very limited. I mean, you've got some agricultural visas. You've got some very limited guest worker visas in jobs or for companies that, you know, have seasonal work. Think timber, think timber and forestry, think resorts along, you know, the coast, that sort of thing. But for the most part, if someone doesn't have at least a bachelor's degree, their options for seeking any sort of visa is based on employment is almost zero.
What's the majority you have? Student visas?
Student visas are, you know, obviously if you've got a university, if there's a university who's willing to admit you, and you can show that you have the ability to pay your tuition and pay your housing and that sort of thing, unless the university is going to offer a scholarship or a stipend for that, yeah, you can get a student visa, but a student visa is very limited and it doesn't provide a lot of employment authorization or very limited employment authorization while the person is in school.
Well, if you have questions for us, it's 256-536-0077, and we'll be back to talk a little more about immigration right after this.
You're watching WAAY 31 Law Call, where lawyers come to help. Your rights, your calls, live. Hosted by family law attorney Sharon Doviat. With the personal injury attorneys of one of the Valley's most respected law firms, Timberlake & League. Featuring the knowledge of managing partner Michael Timberlake, with millions of dollars awarded to his clients. And the experience of attorney Will League, a strong courtroom fighter known for his commitment to winning. And the fellow partners of Timberlake & League Heath Brooks and William Meservey. This is WAAY 31 Law Call.
Welcome back. We're talking about immigration tonight, and I want to do a little public service first. This Tuesday, Broadway Theater League is going to start Aladdin, and these fine folks at Timberlake & League provide the wheelchairs for anybody coming in. So if you need a wheelchair, just call Broadway Theater League. They'll meet you at the drop-off, and they'll take you right to your seat, and they'll pick you up right after the show. And we thank you so much for all that.
All right. You know, the Theater League did a great job. People come all over, and so it's...
We always help an injured people, so
right.
thanks.
That's right.
So introduce Carol one more time.
All right, so, you know, it's not, you know, we have these immigration shows. Everybody, gets on. We see the videos of people crossing the border, and people call with questions, and we appreciate your questions. And we wanted to try and look at the professionals that come in this technical savvy area and the difficulty in getting skilled workers in skilled positions here in North Alabama, especially after the law that was signed in after 1996 by the Republican Congress.
Yeah.
And so Carol Armstrong does stuff in Tuscaloosa, Huntsville, brings skilled workers here all the time, and helps people seeking asylum as well. And wanted to talk a little bit about those two processes and how different they are, because let's face it, a majority of Americans are starting to really lean against immigration, and the country was founded on that. So as a younger guy, you think, well, we're like a boat. We have a limited amount of natural resources. How much more can we take? But it seems like there's a lot more land. It seems like there's a lot more jobs that Americans are not willing to do. But I think everyone can agree it has to be done legally. And when you have someone who is seeking asylum and terrified for their life, what's that process? And then, and Carol, when you have, what skilled professionals come and talk to you, Boeing. I know I've mentioned them several times, but you've got big companies wanting to get skilled people here. They call people like Carol Armstrong to try and work through the process. Right. Carol, how long was it take? You got a skilled employee wanting to come to a high-paying job that American can't do, or there's no one applying for it. How long does that process take for the H-1B visa?
Okay, for the H-1Bs, that's a specialty occupation. That's a job that requires at least a bachelor's degree in a particular field of study. Think engineers, accountants, etc., computer science. Those folks, if the employer is a private company, you're probably looking at, depending on the time of year that the person's wanting to come to work or the company needs that person to come to work, if that person has never had an H-1B before, it might be 6 to 12 months before that person could even start work. And there's not a real reliable system with the H-1B because there are so many more people applying for those H-1Bs than there are the H-1B visa numbers available. They're very limited, and usually what we see is about 3 to 4 times the number of H-1B applications as there are the actual visa numbers available. So a lot of companies just don't trust, if you will, or can't rely on the H-1B system to get their highly skilled workers in.
What's the alternative?
Well, if the worker happens to be from Canada or Mexico, there's a NAFTA type visa called the TN that can also serve for professional type positions, and those are not limited in number like the H-1B is. So that's an option. Other than that, I mean, there are some companies, if they have, operations in the U.S. and another company, and they've got someone that they're trying to bring in, that's called an L visa. The L visa is for intra-company transferees, and sometimes that can work. But there are very specific categories, if you will, and very specific criteria that have to be met in those categories, or the company can't petition for that person to come in on a temporary basis. If we're looking at permanent sponsorship for someone to work on a more permanent basis, a lot of us call those green cards, the options become even more limited. Usually it's going to be jobs that require a bachelor's or master's degree or higher that are actually going to qualify in any reasonable amount of time for that person to get the green card.
Carol, I'm going to try and get another phone call in here.
Okay.
Ollie from Russellville wants to ask you a question. Yes, Ollie, thank you for giving us a call.
Yeah. Hello?
Yes, you're on.
Oh, okay. I was wanting to ask y'all, what do you think about, if someone decides to adopt, the children are here. They're here in Alabama. And they want to adopt these kids because they need to be adopted as soon as possible. Is there any way that, you being an American citizen, that you can get the kids that wasn't born here, can you make them legal?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I absolutely, yes, there are ways to do that. There are a couple of different processes. As far as adoption goes, there are real strict requirements depending on the country that the child was born in on the process that's required to actually go through an adoption and then be able to get that child legal status. There's also a process called a special immigrant juvenile status, and depending on the child's situation, if the child has been abandoned, neglected, or abused by one or both of its parents, then there's a process that's available for that child to actually get permanent resident status.
Interesting stuff.
Well, we're going to take a break here real quick. We'll be right back to finish up about immigration. If you have more questions for Carol Armstrong, you can find her at Armstrong Law here in Huntsville. Her phone number is 256-410-1778, or see her on the web at adgloballaw.com. And of course, Will League with Timberlake and League here in Huntsville. You can reach them at 256-536-0770 or at law-injury.com.
And our very own Sharon Doviet, family law attorney, 539-7337, SharonFamilyLaw.com.
Well, let me mention, you have a Spanish-speaking division of Timberlake and League.
We do, with a lot more Spanish-speaking Americans, and illegal immigrants, in town. In North Alabama, we have a Spanish-speaking attorney. We do handle those cases, and oftentimes, we're on the other side of that. And so, Carol, I've got a comment and a question. So I'll have several cases. Had one most recently in Marshall County. A drunk illegal immigrant hit, severely injured my client, was charged with vehicular assault, all kinds of stuff, was put in jail. And before we could get to our civil trial, ICE came, took him out of jail, and deported him back to Mexico. Now, if he's charged with a crime and he's sitting there, why not wait and let him be judged? And how can that happen?
What usually happens is when someone is charged with a crime, vehicular manslaughter, for example, a bond will be set by the judge in the circuit court, and if the person is able to pay that bond, then they can be quote unquote released by the county. However, ICE puts what's called an immigration detainer on them, and so the person never even leaves the jail. ICE puts a hold on them for 72 hours, and then ICE comes and picks them up. If that person already has a removal order or a deportation order, which sometimes happens, then ICE processes them out pretty quickly,
right.
Without even having them face, if you will, the criminal charges here in the U.S.
And in some of the cases, in the wheels cases, car wreck cases, that's why it's even more important to have underinsured motorist coverage. You have an illegal immigrant hits you, they bond out, they're gone, or ICE takes them out. If you don't have underinsured motorist coverage, it's you'd wish you had. You wish you had it. It covers you for injuries, medical bills, all those things, and that's just another reason to have them. Carol, thank you so much for coming and talk to us about this interesting and obtuse topic.
Now join Timberlake and League every Monday on WAAY 31 Midday News, and we're doing some set changes around here, so we'll see you in a few weeks.
All right.